The goal of the 2025 Spanish Grand Prix was to provide Red Bull Racing a fresh start and an opportunity to regain consistency following a difficult run of events. However, we saw a collision that sent shockwaves across the paddock rather than damage control. Under pressure, Max Verstappen performed poorly and was obviously unhappy, which put him at the center of criticism once more. It might have gone too far this time. With opponents rushing on softer tires and championship prospects dwindling, Verstappen received a call in the final stages of the race that no race leader ever likes to hear: return the position. The events that ensued were so tumultuous and emotionally heated that they led to a more severe punishment from the FIA, as well as significant internal conflict inside the Red Bull group. You should watch the entire video because what's happening could be the most important event of the 2025 Formula One season. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. We go deeply into the unsaid conflicts, political power struggles, and moments that the cameras hardly music capture. We must go back in time to both the incident and the circumstances leading up to it in order to really comprehend how combustible the Spanish Grand Prix weekend was for Red Bull Racing. Once so powerful, Red Bull is no longer unbeatable. Their advantage has been eroded by Mercedes and Ferrari. Four-time world champion Max Verstappen is being pushed into situations where his innate anger and intense annoyance start to triumph over strategic racing, and that boiling point was reached in Barcelona. Following Kimi Antonelli's retirement, the race restarted, bringing the field back together under the safety car. On hard tires, Verstappen had taken a calculated risk. In the meantime, players like George Russell and Charles Leclerc were prepared to jump with new softs. Chaos quickly broke out when the green flag was raised. Russell soon followed Leclerc as he dove down the inside of Turn 1, taking P3, but Verstappen retaliated by running wide into the runoff area and rejoining still in fourth. The stewards had not yet imposed any penalties at that time. Red Bull didn't wait, despite their belief that Verstappen didn't acquire a lasting advantage, as seen by their post-race clarification. Maybe alarmed by recent sanctions or expecting a more severe post-race penalty, Verstappen was told by the squad to let Russell pass willingly. Jean-Pierre Lambias's voice conveyed that message. At that point, everything became really explosive. Max's trusty racing engineer evidently displeased with the request. Verstappen started the game, but on his terms as they approached Turn 5. He seemed to let Russell pass him by easing off the accelerator. However, as soon as Russell got close, Verstappen accelerated once again, slamming the Mercedes wheels as they turned the corner. It was emotional and violent, and many people believed it to be deliberate. At Turn 12, Max finally gave up the position, but the damage had already been done. He was demoted from 4th place to a pitiful 10th. In the final classification, after the stewards found him to be at fault for provoking an accident and gave him a 10-second time penalty. However, the worst blow came just moments later. His super license now has 11 penalty points after 3 were added. The current world champion Max Verstappen will be banned from one race if he receives one more point. That is unheard of terrain. Although Verstappen has always been combative and on edge, he has rarely been this close to suspension. The FIA's findings were devastating. They looked over automobile positioning data, team radios, and telemetry footage. Perhaps more telling than the penalty itself was Red Bull's response to it. Christian, who is typically ready to protect Max at all costs, was notably restrained. They concluded that Verstappen was solely to blame for the crash, and their punishment reflected the seriousness of his acts. Actually, he didn't protect him at all. I acknowledged that the team's proactive decision to yield the position was motivated by their fear of a penalty. His tone was different, less protective and more cautious, almost like he was handling a political situation in the garage rather than a race result. And let's not overlook what was happening on the radio. He acknowledged that Verstappen was frustrated that the move was marginal and that internal discussions would ensue. The conversation between Verstappen and Lambiase was chilly and truncated. When the engineer gave Verstappen the instructions, he hesitated. He was upset. The relationship between the driver and the race engineer, which is sometimes hailed as one of the most successful in Formula One, appears to be strained. Outside of the Red Bull bubble, condemnation was quick. Could this be the first obvious fracture in what has long considered Red Bull's biggest internal asset? The man in the crosshairs, George Russell, didn't hold back. He called the move deliberate, stating that it reminded him of go-karts or sim racing rather than Formula One. Russell didn't explicitly accuse Verstappen of purposefully causing a crash, but he made it clear that he should have been disqualified. If the move was intentional, that bold statement isn't without merit. Fundamentally, Formula One is a millimeter sport. It's normal to be aggressive, but intentional, purposeful contact that goes beyond far, and it's certain that the FIA feels the line was at least breached, if not crossed outright, because they placed Verstappen on notice. This incident's broader ramifications extend well beyond a single race weekend. Once the unstoppable powerhouse of Formula One, Max Verstappen is currently the subject of unprecedented scrutiny. He will be eliminated from the Grand Prix with one careless maneuver or error in the upcoming races. That might be disastrous for a driver vying for a championship. It's a logistical and PR headache for Red Bull. Then there is the psychological component. After the race, Verstappen publicly stated that Red Bull is too slow to compete for the championship. Anyway, that goes beyond simple annoyance. That is an indication of disappointment. He spoke of the clerk sneering at him. He is driving irate. Under pressure, and for the first time in years, losing control of the narrative after Russell dive-bombed him and the team and made calls he didn't agree with. Is there a change in the internal power structure at Red Bull? Could Verstappen's strict control of team tactics and race execution be undermining the silence, or perhaps her lack of support is the clearest sign? Tensions are escalating behind the scenes between Verstappen and Lambiase, the driver and the stewards, Max and the F1 governance organization itself, and maybe Max and his crew. In addition, Ferrari's growing threat, a dangerous combination, is created by Mercedes' improving morale and rumors that Red Bull's once dominant chassis is no longer in control. One additional item is worth mentioning. The penalty points are not immediately reset. They last for a whole year, so Verstappen will be racing for a number of more rounds with the possibility of punishment looming over him. Every curve becomes a potential time bomb, every wheel-to-heel fight, every dangerous overtake. Tell me in the comments if Max Verstappen is headed for a one-race ban, if this is the start of Red Bull's dynasty breaking, or if this is just another storm in a season where he's driving with his back against the wall. More significantly, has Red Bull already lost control of its most potent weapon? Was the action deliberate or the result of frustration? Because of the recent dark turn in this championship match, subscribe now to avoid missing what occurs next.